Good morning, everybody. My name's Antonia Coles from Ecclesiastical, and we're really pleased this morning to be able to bring you a webinar about mental health awareness, which will be presented by Carly Egger and Ian Sutcliffe of Valentis and the Claims Consortium Group. We're just waiting for everybody to join the webinar just for the next few minutes. We will be starting at 11 o'clock. Just to let you know, this webinar is being recorded. Recording has already started. If you do have any inquiries or queries, questions, concerns, you should have a control panel on the right hand side of your screen. Two of the little drop down buttons gives you questions which you can use during the webinar, or chat if you have got any issues is also on there. If you are going to use chat, what I would recommend, particularly for data protection, is to use the little drop down within that chat function, which will currently show you as all entire audience. But if you click on that little arrow and change it to organisers and panelists only, then any chat question or query or problem that you put forward will just come through to us and not the entire audience. Similarly, if during the webinar you do want to ask a question, please make sure you send it privately. But as I say, we'll just wait for the last few people to join us, and then we'll get started in a couple of minutes. Good morning to anyone who's just joined us. We're just waiting for the last few people to join in the webinar. I'll take you through a few housekeeping bits and pieces in just a moment. If you do have any problems or emergency sort of questions you need to ask, please use the chat function, which is on the control panel, which should be on your screen. But when you do use it, please change where you'll see all entire audience, please change that to organisers and panelists only. Okay, so good morning, everybody. It is 11 o'clock. Very big warm welcome and thank you for joining us this morning to Time to Talk about mental health awareness, brought to you by Ecclesiastical. You will be hearing from Carly Egger from the Claims Consortium Group and Ian Sutcliffe of Valentis. They're your presenters for today's webinar. We'll get started in just a moment, but just a few housekeeping things to make you aware of. We are recording this webinar. Recording has already started. If you have a question at any point during the webinar, please use the questions function in the control panel on your screen. Please, when you send your question, please send it to send privately. If you want to ask a quick question or you've got a problem at any time, we'll do our best to help you. But if that's the instance, please use the chat function. But please change that from all entire audience to organisers and panelists only. These two things on the questions and on the chat is just to protect your data and so forth, so it's not shared with everybody. If you want to clear that control panel just to one side at any point so you can see the full screen, there's a little orange arrow at the top that will just minimise it and you'll see it still, so you can maximise it at any time if you do need to use the question function. As I say, we are recording it. The recording will be available in the next few days and we'll let you know when that is available. And if you do need to ask a question, please use the question function, send to privately, and we'll answer all those questions at the end of the session. Right, so I think we're ready to get started. I'd like to introduce Ian Sutcliffe from Valentis and Carly Egger from Claims Consortium Group. Over to you guys and enjoy the webinar. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Antonia. Good morning to you all, and thank you for registering and attending our webinar covering such an important topic. Now, I'm way too old to be using hashtags, but it is hashtag Time to Talk about mental health. I'm Ian Sutcliffe. I'm an insurance professional of nearly 30 years, and I'm a huge advocate for raising awareness about mental health issues, both generally and in the workplace. A little bit about me. My wife and I have 6 children between us, including triplets. All of them are teenagers and regularly discuss mental health issues with their friends and on social media. During the first 26 years of my 28-year career in insurance, talking about mental health has been a big taboo, particularly in the insurance industry. Within the last couple of years, it's become more commonplace, and it's certainly now a daily topic of conversation for teenagers in the playground. From a workplace perspective, my single biggest fear is that we don't catch up and begin to provide a structured support program in business, we'll be in big trouble when the current teenage generation hit the workplace in the next 5 to 7 years or so. Now, I've got 6 of them in my house, and I can guarantee you that we're going to be in big trouble. So a little bit about Carly and I. So who are we? I'm co-founder of Valentis Advisory. We provide strategic support to organisations in the insurance, risk and claims management sector, including wellbeing strategies and mental health awareness and first aid training. I'm also a certified mental health first aider, and I'm a Prince's Trust mentor, helping young people establish new businesses in a wide range of sectors. I'm presenting today with Carly Egger. Carly represents Claims Consortium Group, who are a progressive claims management loss adjusting business, also campaigning for greater awareness of mental health issues in the workplace. I'll just pass to Carly now, who'll give you a little bit of background about herself.
Thank you, Ian. Good morning and welcome to you all. Again, thank you ever so much for this opportunity to speak to you today. I've worked in a training and coaching capacity within the insurance industry for just over 16 years now. And during my 14 years with Claims Consortium Group, I've been involved with a huge range of training activities. The latest of which was the opportunity to become a mental health first aid instructor with MHFA England. We noticed that there was the need for mental health awareness and a robust health and wellbeing strategy within our organisation, and we're now passionate to be able to share that information with other organisations such as yourselves. This is a subject that I'm extremely passionate about. I've suffered from anxiety disorder myself for much of my adult life, and also suffer from crippling glossophobia, which, if any of you know, is the fear of public speaking. Now, luckily today I'm hiding behind a laptop, so I'm not quite as anxious about that as I would have been otherwise. With the work I've done at Claims Consortium, I've been able to overcome a lot of these fears, and with the work that I've done with the MHFA England, I've been able to bring that experience and that passion to others.
Thanks, Carly. Now, we don't just plan to talk at you for the next 30 minutes or so. We've built in a feedback mechanisms through a series of polls. So we would like you, if you can, to get involved and answer some of the questions. We're not looking for personal answers. They're all sort of true or false answers. They'll be easy to answer, so don't worry about that. But we hope it will make the session a little bit more inclusive. So the agenda, this webinar is brought to you in 2 sessions. So session 1 is today, and the agenda items we're going to cover today will be some mental health statistics. We'll play a true or false game around some statistics. We'll cover mental health perceptions and influences. We'll talk about frame of reference and how different things affect different people depending on their frame of reference. We'll talk about the stress container and a little bit about the causes of stress. And then we'll take some questions, should anybody have any questions relating to the subject. So some mental health statistics, and we've tried to bring this to you both in terms of UK statistics and then general insurance specific statistics. So from a UK perspective, 1 in 4 adults in England have been diagnosed with mental ill health. 91 million days are lost to the UK economy each year through a combination of lost productivity, absenteeism and presenteeism, and the total cost is estimated to be between 70 billion and 105 billion. Now, just translating those statistics into the general insurance sector, you won't be surprised to learn that there are no specific statistics. So I've taken those statistics and translated them based upon the number of people employed in the general insurance sector, which is around 330,000, according to the ABI. It's a crude approach, but it's valid for the purposes of this presentation. So as 1 in 4 people in the UK suffer from a diagnosed mental health issue, that means that up to around 10 people on this webinar are affected in some form or other. In the general insurance sector, we lose over $750 million days each year, which is a significant number of lost days. And it costs us up to about £950 million each year. Now, if you compare that to the cost of fraud, for example, which stands at about 1.3 billion per year, it's a significant amount, and we just don't do enough. If it was counter fraud, we'd be doing an awful lot more. And 65% of young people, so age 16 to 25, feel anxious or stressed often or always, according to the Prince's Trust Youth Index survey from 2019. That just ties in nicely with the comments I made earlier in the session with regard to the teenage generation, who are much more aware, talk much more about these types of issues, and it will fall into the workplace as they join over the next few years. So it really is time to take some action in our sector. So earlier this year, Ecclesiastical undertook a survey of the broking community around mental health, and you'll see on the slide here some statistics that were revealed through this survey. 78% of brokers admit to feeling stressed at work, and 1/3 of those suffer stress at least once a week. Half brokers feel anxious or overwhelmed, and 1 in 5 brokers have considered leaving the industry, which is a startling fact. The survey does report progress, which is fantastic. Almost half report flexible working is available within their organisation. 38% mention a supportive culture which promotes mental well-being, which is terrific. And 1 in 5 report advice, support and counselling is also available. 1/4 of brokers believe the industry should be doing more to reduce the stigma of mental health. So we're going to play a true or false game. We're going to use a poll for this for a number of questions. I'm going to pass to Carly, and she's going to ask some questions. And if you'd be kind enough to answer each question with true or false, and we will give you a little bit of feedback and tell you what the correct answer is. So bear with me, I'll pull the first question up, and then we'll set the poll running.
Fantastic, thank you, Ian. Now, as we know, we've already said we all have mental health in the same way that we all have physical health. But as a society, we don't seem to be able to talk about them both with equal measures of honesty and openness. So we all know how important mental health is, and we all know how important it is to have this awareness. But how much do we really know about how big an issue this is? So as Ian said, we've got some true or false questions here for you. So the first one then, mental ill health is responsible for 9 million working days lost and costs £10 billion each year to the UK economy. Do we think that's true or false?
So we've launched the poll there. If you'd be kind enough, excellent.
Fantastic stuff. So we've actually got 80% of you there, or 83% that think that one's true, 16% false. It's actually false on that one. So and the main reason for that is that the figures are actually a lot higher. It's actually 72 million working days lost, with a cost of £34.9 billion each year for the economy. Fantastic. The next one then, the total cost of mental ill health in England is estimated at around £105 billion per year.
Okay, so if you'd be kind enough to vote there. There we go, we've got some feedback coming.
Okay, so the feedback on this one is coming in at 37% true, 63% false. This one I can actually confirm is true. So yes, the total cost is coming in at an estimated 105 billion per year. Okay, question 3 then. 35% of mental illness, excluding dementia, starts before the age of 18.
So we've launched that poll. If you could kindly provide some feedback again, please. Excellent.
Okay, fantastic. We're coming in at 74% true, 26% false. The actual answer on that one is false. So good try, but better luck next time. The figure is actually closer to 75%. So 75% of mental illness starts before the age of 18. As Ian had already mentioned earlier on, it's talked about by youngsters a lot more nowadays than it ever was before. My son is actually 7 and they already have classes in his school talking about mental health. So things are looked at a lot more. And obviously that is an age where an individual's going through a lot of changes, which probably reflects on that figure. Okay, the next question then. Men aged 40 to 49 have the highest suicide rates in Great Britain. Okay, we're coming in at 53% true. Oh, it's actually gone to 50-50 now, which we like. So you're really torn on this one. The answer to that one is actually true. So yes, men aged 40 to 49 have the highest suicide rates in Great Britain. And what's also very interesting is that the construction industry across the board is actually got the highest male suicide rates in Great Britain at the moment. Okay, last question then. 40% of people with diagnosable mental health illness receive no treatment at all. Fantastic, we've come out 50-50 there. So you've either know what I'm doing and you're trying to catch me out with your 50-50 answers. It's actually false on that one. The estimates actually put the figure nearer to 70 to 75%. So that's 70 to 75% of people with a diagnosable mental illness are receiving no treatment at all currently in the UK. What we do have to remember, however, is although that's a diagnosable mental illness, a lot of these individuals will never actually have received that diagnosis. They may not actually be aware that they do have a diagnosable condition. Excellent, fantastic stuff. Thank you for your input there. It's also interesting to mention that one extra little statistic that actually came out from Mental Health First Aid England within the last couple of weeks. There's actually some new results that they've published that the rate of UK suicide in 2018 has actually gone up by 10.9%. And that's the first time we've seen a rise there in the last 5 years. There's a lot more work that can be done to increase awareness and support for those affected. And holding events like this one today is only going to help that. We're going to move on a little bit now to some mental health perceptions. Now, I don't want to focus too much on the stigma around mental health, as we're very aware that this is an issue, but I do want to briefly talk about mental health perceptions and where these can originate from. Research has shown that over a third of the UK public think that people with a mental health issue are likely to be violent. Now, as I'm sure we can all imagine, for many of us, we know that this isn't true, but unfortunately, this is the perception that's given via film, TV, social media. So there's still that really, really negative perception there. People with severe mental illness, so psychosis and schizophrenia, are more likely to be the victims rather than the perpetrators of violent crime. So these individuals are in extremely difficult situations and are extremely vulnerable to actually becoming the victims of crime, whereas unfortunately many people think that they're more likely to be the perpetrators. People with mental ill health are more dangerous to themselves than others. So as we've already mentioned, 80 to 90% who die by suicide are experiencing some kind of mental distress. So it's usually seen that somebody that decides to take their own life or chooses to take their own life have some kind of underlying mental health condition. And poor mental health impacts on individuals and their families. And this can be due to lower income, lower educational attainment, quality of life, and ultimately shorter lifespan. So not only does it affect the individual, but their families, their colleagues, and the greater community. So what actually influences our mental health, and can anything be done to manage this? Now, you can look at this by considering the balance between protective factors and risk factors. So on the screen now, we're actually showing a list of mental health risk factors. So there are quite a lot of these that if an individual has one of these risk factors, they are at a higher likelihood of developing and struggling with mental ill health. They're also much less likely to successfully obtain the support and professional help that they need. On the flip side of that, there are protective factors that an individual could have that would mean that they're less likely to develop difficulties with mental health illness. And this can include things such as positive parenting, good problem solving and communication skill, good emotional literacy, strong values and beliefs, and a stable home environment. So it's very clear to see that the upbringing you have and the environment in which you were raised can have a massive impact on your potential for mental health conditions. Now, these protective and risk factors can be current, or they can be influenced by past experiences. So whilst we can't change past events, by focusing on which of these factors can be developed or strengthened, and which of the risk factors can be addressed and minimalised, we're in a much better place to support our own as well as others' well-being and our journey to recovery. Now, there is an ongoing debate about whether nature, so our genes, or nurture, so our upbringing environment, is more important in influencing our health and well-being. And this obviously has a massive impact on our mental health. In fact, as with the risk and protective factors, it's likely that a balance between the two is at play. It's recognised that individual genes themselves are not static and fixed, and that the way they're expressed in the body can depend on particular environmental factors. Because of the different influences, it's important to treat a person as an individual, as we may not be aware of their background and things that have happened to them in the past. It's also worth considering how our own unique view on the world will impact how we see others. So there's a model that's been put together and a lot of research has been done which talks about frame of reference, and sometimes you'll hear this referred to as your window on the world. The way that we make sense of the world, the way we make sense of other people, and in fact the way we make sense of ourselves, including our feelings, our beliefs and our behaviours, are unique to each and every one of us, and they're shaped by our past experiences and beliefs. We all see things slightly differently, and consequently we treat ourselves and other people differently too. Our individual frame of reference can be influenced by a range of factors, again from our upbringing to our past experiences. So these can include our family situation, the education that we had when we were younger and as we go through life, and also the culture that we were brought up in. And there are a lot of cultural beliefs in different religions, in different areas around the world that will look at mental health in a very different way. So our window on the world shows us being surrounded by factors that have ultimately moulded the beliefs that we have as we go through life. When we're providing mental health first aid to someone, our frame of reference can lead us to make judgments about a person's situation and can actually hinder us from truly listening non-judgmentally to the person that we're trying to help. By understanding where these judgments come from and by having an understanding of them, we can more easily set them aside to help the person in front of us effectively. This can also be the case when identifying mental and ill health in yourself. So it can be very, very difficult to almost forget the things that make us who we are to be able to help somebody else. And actually having those past beliefs can also affect the way that we're able to help ourselves now. So things that we believed and the upbringing we had as a youngster may not really quite fit with today's current world, and they can actually affect the way that we behave around ourselves. It just gives us a little bit of an idea of how we think about things and how we can communicate with others. The last little section that I'm going to look at with you now is what we call the stress container, and this gives us the opportunity to take a little bit of a closer look at ourselves. Now, I think we can all agree that there are times when we all feel a certain level of stress. Again, as with the protective and the risk factors we mentioned before, there are a number of things that can cause an individual's vulnerability to stress to be different to somebody else's, whether that be our genetics, the coping style that we have, our thinking style, again, the environment that we live in, and our social skill. Understanding what causes our stress and taking action to manage these levels is a key part to looking after yourselves. So everybody should have a really good idea of what their stress triggers are. Stress is a body's natural response when it senses danger, so we all experience it, but too much stress left unchecked for too long can interfere with our lives and make us ill. The stress container can actually help us to understand how we experience stress and how to address the levels of stress at any one time. The size of your stress container will reflect how vulnerable you are to stress. And the factors we've already mentioned can impact how small or large your stress container is. If you are vulnerable to stress, then you will have a smaller stress container. And within that, you'll find that it will fill and overflow more quickly compared to someone with a larger container and lower vulnerability to stress. As stress flows into your container, the more stress we're under at any given time, the faster the container will fill. And when that stress level builds up, the container overflows, and this is where issues can start to develop. And we actually would call this emotional snapping. Now, as I'm sure you can all imagine, there are many causes of stress, and this can range from big life changes and big life events, bereavements and things, to general to everyday factors. Research has shown that the 5 key causes of stress have been identified as work, whether that be the work that you're in, your workloads possibly, or time restraints, for example, relationships, whether you're in a relationship, whether you're not, that can stress people out in different ways, families, children especially, anybody there that's got children will understand the stress that they can cause, health, whether that be worries about your own health or worries about the ill health of your loved ones, and also finances, so financial issues can cause massive levels of stress for many people. Once these stress levels begin to rise and your stress container starts to fill, many people will utilise a preferred coping mechanism. And there are many coping strategies that can be used, and these are going to be individual to every person. Now, as you can imagine, some of these may be more useful than others. So we have a list of coping strategies here, and some of these are negative, some of them are a bit more positive. What would be great is if we get a bit of an idea from you as to which we think are the positive or negative coping strategies. Okay, fantastic. So exercise then, we've all gone positive with that one. Much as I hate to admit it, that probably is the case. I've got a yoga DVD sat at home that I've had for 6 months and haven't opened it yet. I know I should, but we'll get there eventually. The next one then. Fantastic. You guys are all thinking the same on this one. So we've got 100% negative on that. Again, we often talk about sort of comfort food and having that level of comfort, but is that a good or negative strategy overall? Okay, the next one. Okay, we've gone negative, 100%. Oh, a couple of you are deviating away. So we've got 6% positive and 94% negative on that one. So working harder being a positive or negative coping strategy. Fantastic. Again, 100% response on that one. So learning a new skill is a positive learning strategy there, or a positive coping strategy. Okay, fantastic. Again, 100% on that one. Oh, we've got a few that have deviated away. 94% positive and 6% negative on sleep, or getting more sleep being a positive coping strategy there. Well done, everybody. 100% negative on that one. Might not necessarily be the way we all feel, and there are a few people that are now starting to deviate. But again, again, we're talking about how much, I guess, will make it either positive or negative. And the final one. Fantastic. Again, you're all straight into 100% negative on that one. Now, all of these coping strategies will work for various different people. So you guys are all right in that some of them are a lot more positive than others. So things like exercise, talking to others, learning a new skill. So whether that be within the workplace, it might be learning a new hobby, learning a language, for example. These are all fantastic coping strategies for a lot of people. We then start to look at things like alcohol, food, caffeine, retail therapy, things like that. Again, they are possibly good coping strategies in the short term. And I think we probably all get to the stage where at the end of a busy week, we think, right, let's go home and treat ourselves to a takeaway or a nice bottle of wine. And in those isolated instances, then yes, they probably are positive coping strategies. However, any of these strategies, if they're taken to the extreme and they become an addiction, and it's the only coping strategy you possibly have, that's when we can start to see some negative impact coming in there. Fantastic. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Carly. That's a terrific overview. So we're about close to the end of this webinar. We've got the opportunity for people to ask questions, and I'll just pass to Antonia, who'll just give you a bit of direction there if there are any questions to ask.
Yeah, hi everybody. If you do have a question to ask, if you open your control panel on the right hand side of your screen, you'll see a number of drop downs, one of which is questions. If you type into one of those blank, sort of slightly grey fields and send privately, that will just come through to us, the organisers and panellists. If you do send it to all, it will go to everybody. So it's probably best to use it, send privately. So we'll just give you a couple of minutes to try that.
Okay, so there don't seem to be any questions. We must have done a terrific job there in providing all the information that you wanted. I'll just give one last chance if there is anything anybody wants to ask. Give you 5 seconds or so, and otherwise we'll move on to the last couple of slides.
Yeah.
Okay, we have one question through. So, is there any research into why so many of the young generation now are suffering from mental health? I know we are just more aware of it now, but it seems to be the way. Seems to be so many suffering in the young age bracket.
I think really from an MHFA point of view, they have done quite a lot of work around this. As part of Mental Health First Aid England, they actually do have a separate youth mental health awareness programme. And that's now rolled out around a lot of colleges and universities and a lot of youth clubs. Exactly as you say, I think the main reason we're seeing these figures go up so much is because there's a lot more awareness around it, and this younger generation are a lot more open to talking about it. So it may clearly be that this has always been the case, but in the past people just haven't been open to talk. I also think that there's a lot of pressure put on this age group now. When you start to look at the pressures of social media and things that these people are seeing, or these individuals are seeing, maybe on TV and film. There was actually a programme on this week regarding somebody that was in a pop band. Those of you anybody here that watches X Factor. And it was actually that individual's story about the way that what should have been a fantastic thing for her, she was getting slated a lot on social media, and there were a lot of trolls that were out and making very, very derogatory comments about her. And it talked a lot about the impact that has had. And I think it's really important that we're encouraging that, and that we're encouraging that in the younger generation. And I think that the pressures they're under and the access they've got to fantastic information, also the access they've got to the possible stigma is causing that problem.
That's great. Thank you, Carly, and thank you to the provider of that question. So we'll just move on to the last couple of slides, if that's okay. Thank you for listening and bearing with us. I think it's always important to provide an element of signposting to help when we're talking about mental health. So if any of you are struggling, if any of you know of anybody that is struggling with any form of mental health, it's always important to talk to people if you can. If there isn't anybody that you can talk to, or those affected can talk to, there are organisations, charities out there who can help, and we've provided some contact information here on this slide, and copies of the slides will be available. So please feel free to share any of that with anybody you think may be struggling. We will just give you the second session, which will cover a few more elements relating to this topic. I'll just cover the brief agenda with you. We've got quite a good number registered already, so if you're not registered and would like to register for that, please feel free to do so. What we're going to do in that session is just a brief recap from this session today. We're going to talk a little bit about anxiety and depression. We're going to cover the signs and symptoms of both of those illnesses. We're going to walk through the Take 10 Together initiative, which is about taking 10 minutes to talk to somebody about any issues or concerns that they may have around mental health. And we're going to explain what action your organisation can take, and it will be useful. We'll have a poll there as well to establish whether there has been any positive action in any of your organisations. That's all confidential, of course, through the polls, but will give us an idea of which organisations in our sector, or what type of organisations in our sector, are taking action, and where there might be opportunity for your organisation to do more. So that's the next session, which is 11 AM on Thursday this week. If anybody does have any questions that they didn't want to raise or ask on this webinar, then feel free to contact me either directly or via my mobile phone. Some details are there, available there, and I'll thank you all for your attendance and pass back to Antonia to close.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ian, and thanks very much, Carly. I think that's a really interesting initial insight into mental health awareness. So thank you ever so much for joining us this morning, and thanks again to our speakers. We will now close the session, which will stop it recording. If you do have any further questions, obviously get in touch with one of us and we'll be happy to answer those. Hopefully speak to you on Thursday, and for now, thanks very much and goodbye.
Thank you all. Goodbye.